The story of Princess Diana is, in many ways, the story of a fairy tale gone tragically askew. It is the tale of a girl born into aristocracy who stepped into a fairy tale wedding and found herself in the whirlwind of royal expectation, global adulation, profound loneliness, and inner turmoil. And within that grand stage, there were currents of secrecy, betrayal, desire, and sorrow, the hidden corridors of the palace whispering of extramarital relationships and scandals that rare few ever saw beyond the velvet curtains. Chapter 1: The Wedding and the Illusion. It was 29th of July, 1981. Diana Spencer, young, graceful, almost luminous in her white gown, stood before the world, marrying Charles, Prince of Wales, in a ceremony watched by billions. The bells of St. Paul's Cathedral rang, the cheers rose, the press swooned. The world desired a modern fairy tale, the handsome prince, the humble maiden, happily ever after. But beyond the spectacle, a quieter truth lay in the shadows. In the early years of their marriage, Charles and Diana seemed, publicly at least, to fulfill their roles. But as the months turned to years, fissures emerged beneath the polished surface. Biographers later revealed that Charles had resumed contact with his longtime confidant and friend, Camilla Parker Bowles, the woman he is said to have loved before and who would loom throughout the marriage. Diana sensed it. She cried. She retreated. She felt like a spectator in her own life. The great irony, at a moment when the world was convinced of her fairy tale, Diana was already aware of the other woman, of the whisperings in the palace corridors, of her husband's emotional absence. She was married to the heir to the throne, yet she felt bereft of the simple intimacy that love might bring. Chapter 2: Loneliness and the Hidden Years. When one wears a crown of public love, one can still feel utterly alone. Diana gave birth to two sons, Prince William, Prince of Wales, in 1982, and Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, in 1984. And yet the emotional landscape around her remained barren. The royal household had its rules, its rituals. She had her charity work, her smiling appearances, her fashion icons. But inside, she struggled. In 1986, the couple's marriage had cracked deeper than ever. Charles's relationship with Camilla revived in earnest. Meanwhile, Diana began seeking emotional solace elsewhere. They were living together, yet apart. According to her later confessions and biographies, she felt isolated, infantilized, invisible. It is in this atmosphere of emotional starvation that Diana's first significant emotional and physical affair begins to emerge. The world would hear of it later, but at the time it was hidden behind palace walls and newspapers that controlled their narratives. Chapter 3: The Affair with the Riding Instructor. The whisper began softly and gradually became a roar. Diana's affair with James Hewitt, a cavalry officer and one of her riding instructors. The biographies place the affair beginning in about 1986 and lasting for several years. Picture a country cottage in Devon, creaking wooden floorboards, horse stables, the perfume of hay, early morning mist on the lawns, away from Buckingham Palace's gaze, away from the rigorous choreography of royal life. Here, in the quiet, the princess found someone who looked at her with something like longing, desire, and attention, things she had found lacking. Hewitt later described their meeting: the late night phone calls, the arrangements, the code names, the sense of transgression, and the thrill of being outside of the fixity of royal expectation. While Diana's position gave her one sort of spotlight, inside she longed for warmth, for agency, for an affair of her heart. The text records: Hewitt, a natural womanizer, gave her the attention and affection she relished, and then the passion she yearned for. Yet this affair was complex. There were whispers that Diana hoped for something more permanent with Hewitt, and yet the very nature of her life made permanence almost impossible. Had she married him, she would have relinquished titles, duties, the crown's expectations. Thus, there was escape, but only temporary. Chapter 4. Camilla, the Other Woman, and the Hidden Triangle. While Diana looked outward in search of support, there was a figure who haunted the marriage: Camilla Parker Bowles. Charles's emotional entanglement with Camilla never truly ended. It had been reignited by the mid-1980s. Diana's private agony to know that her husband loved another woman and that she herself had been cast aside in role more ornamental than partner. In her own words, she confronted Camilla in 1989. "I obviously am in the way, but I do know what is going on." In the palace corridors, courtiers whispered about Camilla's hold on Charles, about Diana's mounting paranoia, about the feeling that she was the third wheel in a relationship that never belonged fully to her. Candid biographies describe the marriage as fractured from early on, characterized by mistrust, jealousy, control, and a profound misalignment of expectations. Thus, the love triangle: Charles, Camilla, Diana. It was less about dramatic public scenes and more about slow erosion. The glances unsent, the phone calls unanswered, the illusions unfulfilled. Chapter 5. Squidgygate, Tapes, and Tensions. By the early 1990s, the palace could no longer silently control the narrative. In 1992, the scandal dubbed Squidgygate erupted. Telephone recordings of Diana speaking intimately with a friend, James Gilby, in which she was referred to in affectionate code names such as Squidgy. The tapes were sold to newspapers and published, exposing parts of the private life of Diana to the world. In one of the recorded calls, she expressed concern she might be pregnant. It was a vivid demonstration of how her personal life had become fodder for tabloids, how fiercely the public demanded glimpses behind the royal curtain. The palace's reaction was defensive. The management of the royal image tightened. Diana felt besieged by the press, by the palace, by expectation. She began to feel the walls closing in. She was no longer just the people's princess. She had become the people's spectacle. Chapter 6. The Public Admission and the Breakdown. In 1994, the world watched as the marriage between Charles and Diana unraveled openly. The black off-the-shoulder gown Diana wore to a dinner at the Serpentine Gallery that year became known as the revenge dress. She entered the event mere days after Charles's televised admission of adultery. The dress became a symbol of defiance, of transformation, of taking control of one's own narrative. Behind the scenes, the palace's narrative machine strained. The monarchy could no longer guard secrets the way it had. Diana cooperated with biographer Andrew Morton in his book Diana, Her True Story, which revealed her struggles with bulimia, depression, and suicidal thoughts, and confirmed the depth of the fissures in the marriage. On the 20th of November, 1995, Diana's landmark interview with the BBC's Martin Bashir aired, in which she said the marriage was irretrievably broken and acknowledged the affair with James Hewitt. That moment signaled a turning point. The private life of royalty was now the public spectacle. The palace could no longer contain the story. The story contained the palace. Chapter 7. Diana's Search for Love and Meaning. Even as the public watched the breakdown of one marriage, Diana sought solace in other relationships, less formal, less royal, more personal. After the separation, she began an intimate relationship with Hasnat Khan, a Pakistani heart surgeon, often described as the love of her life. The romance lasted around 2 years. Quietly, imagine an ordinary flat in Chelsea, Diana doing dishes, folding laundry, living the invisible life of someone who just wants to be loved. She and Khan had considered moving to Pakistan. They had talked of escape, but the press would not relent. In the end, he withdrew. The burden of her public role proved insurmountable. Later came the relationship with the Dodi Fayed, the son of Egyptian billionaire Mohammed Al Fayed. It was intense, very public, by Diana's standards, brief and fatal, heiress to the fairy tale, the woman who had become the most photographed person in the world. Diana still craved love that was uncomplicated. Instead, she found herself back in the glare of cameras. Chapter the Skirtis, the palace intrigue, the cover ups, the rumors. Beyond the relationships themselves lay the machinery of royalty, the courtiers, the protection officers, the palace staff, the image makers. Diana believed the palace was against her. She believed they orchestrated leaks, controlled the press, suppressed her emotional truth. Biographers document her suspicion that her husband's security, his friends, the palace machine were all aligned, and that she was increasingly isolated. There are stories, still partially verified, of photographs buried, of off the record phone calls, of heavy efforts to keep Diana's extramarital affairs from sight while the palace itself quietly managed the ripple of Charles's. One insider claimed they didn't want Diana in the press. The more pictures that weren't out there, the better, because someone would have said, "This is her at the show that she turned up to with James Hewitt in the corridors of Kensington Palace." There were whispers of the dreaded Diana tape, of staff being warned, of lobbyists and image makers working behind closed doors. Once, she believed, she was in love with a bodyguard, Barry Manicky. He died in a motorcycle accident in 1987, and Diana told himself that she believed he had been bumped off. The monarchy, built on tradition and discretion, found itself confronted with an unrelenting modern media, a woman who would not conform to being merely a royal accessory, and the unraveling of a marriage that had been touted as perfect. Chapter 9, Reflections in the Mirror. As we look back, Diana's life teaches us this, that glamour and solitude often occupy the same room, that public adoration may mask private despair, that royal duty and personal fulfillment can be conflicting callings. In her search for love, whether through an affair with her instructor, a surgeon, or a playboy, or simply through seeking attention in the world's gaze, Diana was at once extraordinary and vulnerable. Her extramarital relationships were not just about breaking rules, they were about keeping herself alive emotionally. Her marriage to Charles felt to her like it was never hers. The palace expected her to smile, to wave, to fulfill the role. In the hidden cottage in Devon, in the narrow flat in London, in the tear-stained pillows, she sought agency. When Diana donned the revenge dress, she was saying, "I am still here." When she admitted the marriage was irrevocably broken, she was saying, "I refuse to be silent." And when she loved Hasnat, she was reaching for normalcy in a world that gave her none. Do we judge her for the affairs? Or do we understand the context? A young woman thrust into the most public marriage in the world, stripped of privacy, surrounded by machinery, still human and still longing. In the grand sweep of British modern history, the story of Diana and Charles, Diana and her lovers, Diana and the palace, is perhaps a moment of transformation. The royal family's rituals, once hidden behind closed doors, became part of public discourse. The veneer of perfection cracked, and the world glimpsed something deeper, the fragility of human hearts, even beneath crowns. Chapter X: Aftermath and Legacy. Diana and Charles divorced in 1996. The separation was painful, public, and final. But Diana remained a figure of global warmth, not just royalty, but a woman who tried to love, tried to live, tried to matter. Her subsequent relationship with Dodi Fayed ended in the tragedy of 31st August 1997, when she died in a car crash in Paris. In death, her legacy multiplied. The world remembered the smiling princess who hugged children in hospital wards, who walked into mines, who thrust open the sometimes sealed doors of royalty. And yet, the extramarital relationships, the palace intrigue, the hidden sufferings, they remain part of that legacy too. They remind us that even the people's princess had hidden chambers in her life, unseen by most. The royal institution changed. The monarchy adapted to the 21st century. Diana's story became a cautionary tale about the cost of celebrity, the burden of expectation, and the noise that surrounds public life. The palace learned that secrets, no matter how carefully buried, tend to rise. The media learned that the royal family, once impregnable, might bleed. And for us, the audience, Diana's journey invites reflection on love and betrayal, on duty and desire, on the sacrifices demanded by public life. It asks, when the world is full of people watching you, who truly sees you? Epilogue: Silence after the storm. In the quiet after the storm, one imagines Diana alone in her mind's eye, the clicks of cameras gone, the perfect gowns hung away, the palace's bustle faded. Maybe she wandered the gardens of Kensington Palace, felt the breeze, heard the gravel crunch underfoot, remembered the laughter of her sons, the highlights and the heartbreaks. She knew she would never escape being Princess Diana, but she sought in the inside corners of her life the girl she had been before the world asked her to be an icon. She chased love not for its symbolism, but for its truth. Whether she succeeded or failed, she dared to want it. And in that courage, in that pursuit, we find something enduring. A human story in the pageantry, an ache behind the tiara, a longing behind the smile. Thank you for joining this deep dive into royal history and personal truth. If you found value in this story, please like the video, subscribe for more narrative documentary style explorations, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next episode. In the comments below, tell us what surprised you most about Princess Diana's story of love and intrigue. Until next time, keep questioning the history behind the headlines, and remember, every crown has its weight, and every silk gown hides human threads.